Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode where we dive deep into the journey of mastering the English language. I'm your host, Tom, and sitting right across from me, looking very excited today, is the wonderful Ria. How are you doing today, Ria?
I am doing fantastic, Tom. Thank you so much for asking. I am actually really pumped for today's topic because I think this is the number one thing people ask us about. It is the holy grail of language learning. Everyone wants to know the secret.
They really do. We live in a world where everyone wants everything instantly. We want our food fast, we want our internet fast, and yes, we want to learn English fast. So today, we are going to break it down. We are going to talk about the tricks, the hacks, and the mindset shifts that can actually speed up the process. Because Ria, let's be honest, traditional learning can feel so slow sometimes.
Oh, it can feel painfully slow. I remember when I first started learning, I felt like I was stuck on the same level for years. I would memorize a list of words, pass a test, and then 2 days later, I would try to speak, and my mind would just go blank. It was so frustrating. I felt like I was spinning my wheels in the mud.
I think so many of our listeners are nodding their heads right now. That feeling of hitting a plateau is real. But you managed to break through that. You found a way to accelerate your learning, and that is what we want to share today. So let's not keep them waiting. When you look back at your journey, what was the first major shift that took you from slow learning to fast learning?
You know, Tom, the first thing wasn't even a study technique. It was a lifestyle change. It sounds dramatic, but I realized that I was treating English like a subject, like math or history. I would study it for an hour, close the book, and then go back to living my life in my native language. The trick that changed everything was immersion. But I'm not talking about buying a plane ticket and moving to New York or London.
Right, because that is what everyone says. Just go live in America and you'll be fluent in 3 months. But that is not possible for most people.
Exactly. And honestly, I know people who have lived in the US for 10 years and still struggle because they stay in their own language bubble. So I created an artificial English bubble right here at home. The first trick was changing my digital environment. I changed the language on my phone to English. I changed my social media settings. I started following accounts that only posted in English.
That is such a small thing, but it is powerful. I remember when I did that, suddenly every time I looked at my phone, which, let's be honest, is 100 times a day, I was forced to think in English. Settings, notifications, upload, share. It forces your brain to stop translating and start accepting these words as normal.
It really does. And then I took it a step further. I stopped watching movies with subtitles in my native language. This was hard at first, I won't lie. It was uncomfortable. I would watch a show and maybe understand only 30% of it, but I forced myself to stick with it. I turned on English subtitles for a while and then eventually turned them off completely. It trained my ear to catch the rhythm of the language, not just the vocabulary.
I love that you mentioned the discomfort. I think that's the barrier for speed. People want to learn fast, but they want it to be easy. But actually, the speed comes from the struggle. When your brain is struggling to understand that movie, it's working overtime. It's building new connections. If you always rely on the translation, your brain gets lazy.
That is the perfect way to put it. Your brain gets lazy. And speaking of lazy brains, that brings me to the second trick I used, which I think is the most important one for speaking fluently and quickly. It's called shadowing. Have you heard of this?
Shadowing. Yes, I have. But for those listening who might not know, can you explain exactly how you did it? Because I think people get this wrong sometimes.
Sure. So shadowing is not just listening and repeating after the audio stops. That is repetition. Shadowing is speaking almost at the same time as the speaker. You're like a shadow following right behind them. So I would put on a podcast just like this one or a YouTube video of a native speaker I liked, and I would try to mimic them exactly. Not just the words, but the emotion, the pauses, the intonation, even the way they laughed. It is exactly like acting. And that is why it works. Because English isn't just about grammar rules. It is about the music of the language. English has a melody. It goes up and down. If you speak English with the melody of your native language, it sounds robotic or heavy. Shadowing taught me how to link words together. You know how native speakers don't say, I am going to, they say, I'm gonna?
Right. Or what are you doing becomes what you doing.
Exactly. And if you learn from a textbook, you learn the slow, separated version. But real life is fast. Shadowing bridges that gap. It builds muscle memory in your mouth. My jaw actually used to hurt after doing it for 20 minutes because I was using muscles I wasn't used to using.
That is a good sign, though. That means it is working. It is like going to the gym. If your muscles are sore, you know you had a good workout. So we have immersion in the digital world, and we have shadowing for physical practice. But what about the mental side? I know one of the biggest things that slows people down is that they are constantly translating in their heads.
Oh, the translation trap. That is the enemy of speed. If you hear a sentence in English, translate it to your language, think of a response in your language, and then translate it back to English, you are already 5 seconds behind the conversation. The trick I used to stop this was narrating my day.
Narrating your day? Tell me more about that.
It sounds a little bit crazy, and you have to be okay with looking a little silly if you do this in public, but mostly I did it at home. I would literally talk to myself about what I was doing. I would be making coffee, and I would say out loud, okay, I am grabbing the cup. I am pouring the water. The water is hot. It smells like coffee.
I love this. It's like being the commentator of your own life.
Yes. And the rule was I couldn't stop to look up a word. If I didn't know the word for kettle, I had to describe it. I would say, the machine that boils water. This taught me to be flexible. It taught me to think around obstacles instead of getting stuck. And because I was connecting the English words directly to the action I was doing, I stopped needing the translation. I saw the water, and the word water popped into my head, not the word in my native language.
That direct connection is key. You're bypassing the middleman. You're wiring your brain to associate the object directly with the English word. And I think what you said about describing the word you don't know is so important. I see so many learners freeze up in a conversation because they forget one specific noun. They just stop talking. But if you practice describing things, you can keep the flow going. You can say, the thing you use to open a door instead of key, and the conversation continues.
Precisely. Fluency isn't about knowing every word in the dictionary. It's about keeping the flow. It's about communication. And that leads me to another huge trick that helped me learn fast. I had to change my relationship with mistakes.
This is a deep one. The fear of making mistakes is paralyzing.
It really is. We are taught in school that mistakes are bad. If you make a mistake on a test, you get a red mark, you get a lower grade. So we grow up terrified of being wrong. But in language learning, mistakes are the only way to grow. I made a deal with myself. I told myself, Ria, your goal today is to make 30 mistakes.
Wait, your goal was to make mistakes, not to avoid them?
Yes, I gamified it. If I made a mistake, it meant I was speaking. It meant I was trying. If I had a day with 0 mistakes, it usually meant I barely opened my mouth. So I started celebrating the blunders. I remember once I told someone, I am so boring, when I meant I am so bored.
Oh no, that is a classic one. I am boring versus I am bored.
It was so embarrassing. The person looked at me like, wow, you have low self-esteem. But we laughed about it. And you know what? I never made that mistake again. The embarrassment seared the correct grammar into my brain instantly. If I hadn't made that mistake, I might still be confused about it today. Pain is a very effective teacher.
That is such a great perspective. Embracing the cringe, embracing the awkwardness. It takes a lot of courage, but it speeds up the process so much. If you're waiting until you're perfect to speak, you will never speak.
Never. You have to be willing to sound like a baby for a while. You have to be willing to sound broken. That is the fast track. The people who learn the slowest are the perfectionists. They analyze a sentence for 2 minutes before saying it. By that time, the topic has changed.
So true. Speed requires letting go of perfection. I want to touch on something else you mentioned earlier about how studying felt like a chore. How did you keep the motivation up? Because learning fast requires intensity, and intensity can lead to burnout.
That is a great question. The trick there was to stop studying English and start using English to learn about things I actually loved. This is what I call content-based learning. I love cooking. So instead of reading an English textbook about going to the post office, which is boring, I started watching master chefs in English. I started reading recipes in English.
So you hacked your brain's interest.
Yes, I forgot I was learning English because I was so focused on how to bake the cake. When you are interested in the topic, your brain absorbs the vocabulary like a sponge because it wants the information. If you love football, watch commentary in English. If you love makeup, watch beauty tutorials in English. Don't force yourself to read the news if you hate politics just because you think it makes you sound smart.
This is brilliant because it turns study time into hobby time. You are not subtracting time from your day to learn English. You are just layering English on top of what you already enjoy.
Exactly. It makes the process sustainable. And consistency is the secret sauce of speed. This is the paradox. To learn fast, you have to be consistent over time. You can't cram for 10 hours on Sunday and do nothing for the rest of the week. That doesn't work. It is better to do 20 minutes every single day.
The frequency matters more than the duration.
100%. I call it the 2-minute rule. On days when I was exhausted, when I didn't want to study, I told myself, just do 2 minutes. I would listen to one song or read one page of a book. Usually, once I started, I would keep going for 20 minutes, but having that low barrier made it impossible to skip a day. And those small daily deposits compound. It's like compound interest in a bank. After 6 months, you are rich in vocabulary.
I think that helps take the pressure off, too. Thinking I need to study for an hour feels heavy. Thinking I just need to listen to a song feels light.
It does. And speaking of songs, music was a huge accelerator for me. It sticks in your head. You know how you get a song stuck in your head and you can't get it out? That is what you want with English. I would print out the lyrics of my favorite songs, translate them so I understood the meaning, and then sing along until I could do it without looking. It teaches you pronunciation, rhythm, and slang all at once.
And it's fun. You can do it in the car, in the shower. It's joyful. I think we forget that learning should be joyful.
We do forget that. We treat it like a job. But think about how children learn. They play, they mimic, they laugh. They don't have grammar books, they just absorb. We need to tap back into that childlike curiosity.
So let's recap some of these tricks because we have covered a lot of ground. We have the environment shift, changing your phone, your media. We have shadowing to build the physical muscle memory. We have narrating your day to stop translating. We have the mindset shift of embracing mistakes. And we have connecting English to your hobbies and passions.
And consistency. Don't forget the daily habit.
Right, the daily habit. Now, Ria, I want to ask you about the plateau of despair. You know that moment about 3 months in where you feel like you're learning fast and then suddenly you feel like you aren't improving anymore? How do you push through that to keep the speed up?
Oh, the plateau is dangerous. That's where most people quit. The trick is to realize that a plateau is actually a good sign. It means your brain is consolidating what you've learned. You're moving from conscious competence, where you have to think hard to do it right, to unconscious competence, where it becomes automatic. When I hit a plateau, I would change my input.
Change the input? How?
If I was listening to a lot of podcasts, I would switch to reading novels. If I was reading a lot, I would switch to speaking with a tutor. Sometimes your brain just gets bored of the same format. Shocking the system with a new type of challenge wakes your brain up again. I remember I felt stuck once, so I tried to write a diary in English, just 5 sentences a day. It was so hard, but it forced me to produce language in a new way, and suddenly I started improving again.
That is great advice. Don't just push harder, push differently. Mix it up. I also think recording yourself is a powerful trick. Did you ever do that?
I did, and oh my gosh, listening to your own voice is painful. Nobody likes how they sound, but it is the honest truth. You hear mistakes on the recording that you don't hear when you are speaking. You hear that you are saying too much or that your R sounds a bit strange. It gives you immediate feedback. I would record myself reading a paragraph, listen to it, compare it to a native speaker, and then record it again. The second version was always 10 times better.
It gives you objective data. Instead of just feeling like I am bad at English, you can say, oh, I need to fix my TH sound. It makes the problem solvable.
Exactly. It takes the emotion out of it and turns it into a project. And seeing that progress is motivating. I kept my recordings from when I started. Sometimes when I felt discouraged, I would listen to a recording from 6 months ago, and I would be shocked. I would think, wow, I was really slow back then. I have actually improved so much. We often forget how far we have come because we're only looking at how far we have to go.
That is such a beautiful point. We are always looking at the mountain ahead, but we forget to look at the valley we just climbed out of. You need to give yourself credit.
You really do. Confidence is half the battle. If you believe you can learn fast, you will. If you tell yourself, I am just bad at languages, I am too old, I don't have time, then your brain will prove you right. You have to be your own biggest cheerleader.
I want to touch on vocabulary for a second, because there are thousands and thousands of words. How did you learn vocabulary fast without just memorizing boring lists?
Flashcards are okay, but they lack context. The trick I used was the sentence method. Never learn a word alone. If you learn the word stubborn, don't just write stubborn equals obstinate. Write a sentence about someone you know. My brother is so stubborn, he never listens to me.
Because our brains are wired for stories, not data.
Yes! When you attach a person or a feeling to the word, it sticks. I also used the sticky note method. I labeled everything in my house, the mirror, the fridge, the window, but I wouldn't just write mirror. I would write a phrase like, look in the mirror. Seeing the words in my physical space every day forced me to review them without actually studying.
That is passive learning at its best. You're absorbing it just by walking around your house.
And one more vocabulary trick. Focus on the most common words first. The Pareto principle. 80% of spoken English comes from 20% of the words. Don't worry about learning the word for photosynthesis or bureaucracy in the beginning. Master the verbs get, have, make, do. Master the connectors because, however, although. If you master the core, you can explain almost anything, even if you don't know the specific complex word.
That is working smart, not just hard. You build a strong foundation, and then you can add the fancy decorations later.
Exactly. Build the house first, then worry about the curtains.
I love that analogy. Ria, as we start to wrap up, I want to ask you about the social aspect. Learning alone can be lonely. Did you find a community?
I did, and that was crucial. You need to find a tribe. I joined online communities, language exchange apps where I could talk to people. Even just commenting on YouTube videos in English helps. You realize you are not alone. There are millions of people on this same journey. And honestly, English speakers are generally very encouraging. They love it when you try to learn their language. They're not judging you as harshly as you are judging yourself.
That is very true. Most people are just happy to connect. They're listening to what you're saying, not just how you're saying it.
Connection is the goal. Never forget that. We learn languages to connect with human beings, to share stories, to understand different cultures. We don't learn just to pass a grammar test. Keep the human element at the center, and the speed will follow because you will be driven by a real desire to connect.
That is powerful. It shifts the focus from performance to relationship.
It changes everything. And one final thing I want to say to everyone listening. The fact that you are listening to this podcast right now in English proves that you have what it takes. You are already doing it. You are immersing yourself. You are challenging yourself.
Yes, give yourself a pat on the back for being here. You are investing in yourself.
So take one of the tricks we talked about today. Maybe it is the shadowing. Maybe it is the narrating your day. Maybe it is changing your phone language. Just pick one and try it for a week. See how it feels. You don't have to do everything at once.
Start small, but start today.
Start today. Momentum is your best friend. Once you start rolling, it gets easier and easier. And remember, every native speaker you see was once a baby who couldn't speak a word. Every expert was once a beginner. You are on the right path.
I think that is the perfect message to end on. It is not a race against others, it is a journey with yourself. Ria, thank you so much for sharing these insights. I know this is going to help so many people break out of that slow lane and get into the fast lane of learning.
It was my absolute pleasure, Tom. I love talking about this because I know how much learning English changed my life. It opened doors for my career, for travel, for friendships. I want that for every single person listening.
It really is a key to the world. Thank you all for tuning in to Real English Voices. We appreciate you, we believe in you, and we can't wait to hear about your progress. Leave us a comment and let us know which trick you are going to try first.
Yes, let us know. We love reading your stories. Keep speaking, keep making mistakes, and keep smiling.
See you in the next episode.
Bye, everyone.
Goodbye.